Have you ever had that sensation of living inside a dream? That moment when you stop and look around and realize that the entire reality you consider normal, that you accept without questioning, suddenly seems artificial, like an elaborate stage set? It is like briefly waking up inside a dream and realizing you are dreaming, only to be pulled back into the dream narrative seconds later. Many of us have these moments of momentary clarity, these unsettling glimpses, where the plot of reality seems to reveal its seams, where the veil of normality becomes temporarily transparent. And then, almost immediately, the world pulls us back into its rhythm, into its demands, into its fabricated urgencies, and that perception fades like mist under the morning sun. What you glimpsed in that fleeting moment was not an illusion, but precisely the opposite. It was a rare moment of lucidity in the midst of an entire life spent inside collective illusions. And if I tell you that much of what we consider unquestionable reality, from our economic system to our national identities, our social structures, our concept of success, are in fact elaborate collective fictions that survive only because we believe in them collectively? It is about this matrix of shared illusions and how occasionally some people manage to escape them that we will talk today. To understand how we are trapped in collective illusions, we must first understand how we humans build social reality. During most of our evolutionary history, we lived in small groups of hunter-gatherers, rarely larger than 150 people. This number is not arbitrary. It is approximately the maximum number of individuals with whom a person can maintain stable relationships and understand who each one is in the group. Beyond that number, our primate brains simply cannot process all the complex social relationships. However, around 70,000 years ago, our species went through what I call the cognitive revolution. We developed the unique ability to create and believe in shared fictions, in stories that exist only in our collective imagination. Suddenly, thousands and even millions of strangers could cooperate effectively because everyone believed in the same stories, the same myths, the same invented rules. Think about money. What is money really? Those paper bills or digits in your bank account have no intrinsic value. A monkey would not trade a banana for a 100 real bill. The value of money exists only because we collectively agree that it has value. It is an extremely useful shared fiction, perhaps the most successful in human history, but still a fiction. In the same way, think of nations. Brazil does not exist in objective reality. You cannot see Brazil from space. What you see are mountains, forests, rivers, cities, but national borders exist only in our shared imagination and in the maps we create to represent them. Yet millions of people are willing to live, fight, and even die for these imaginary lines. Or consider corporations like Google or Petrobras. In a physical sense, they do not exist. You cannot touch Google. You can touch the buildings where Google employees work. You can touch the computers they use. But the entity Google itself is a legal and social construction that exists only because we collectively believe it exists. What is extraordinary is not just that we created these fictions, but that somehow we forgot we invented them. We begin treating them as objective realities, as laws of nature, instead of contingent social constructions that could be different, it is as if we are hypnotized by our own stories. And even more extraordinary is that these fictions have real power in the world. If I try entering the United States without a visa, a totally imaginary object, I will be detained by very real men with very real guns. Physical reality ends up bowing to shared fiction. Now, this is not necessarily bad. These shared fictions are what allowed our species to cooperate on an unprecedented scale and create complex civilizations. Without them, we would be limited to small tribal groups like our ancestors. However, the problem arises when we confuse these social constructions with absolute reality, when we forget that we are the creators of these stories and begin seeing ourselves as mere pieces within them. It is like a playwright who forgets he wrote the play and believes he is simply following a script handed to him by the universe. Let us consider one of these particularly powerful fictions today, the narrative of perpetual economic growth. For most of human history, economies grew very slowly or not at all. It was only in recent centuries that we adopted the idea that economies not only can, but must grow continuously, year after year, forever. This has become so fundamental to our worldview that we rarely question its logic. However, any infinite growth on a finite planet is mathematically impossible. It is a fundamental contradiction. But we built entire societies, political systems, and personal identities around this particular illusion. Or consider the fiction of modern consumerism, the story that more consumption leads to more happiness. This narrative is bombarded into our minds since childhood through advertising, popular culture, and even education. We are conditioned to believe that the next phone, the next car, the next house, the next clothing item will bring lasting satisfaction. However, decades of research in psychology have repeatedly shown that once our basic needs are met, additional material goods contribute very little to sustained happiness. In fact, the most consumerist societies often have high rates of depression, anxiety, and other mental health problems. Yet, we continue collectively in this rat race, as if we could not imagine an alternative. Perhaps the deepest illusion is that of a fixed identity. From early on, we are taught that we have a stable and coherent self, a fundamental identity that remains constant over time. However, both neuroscience and Buddhist philosophy have long pointed to the illusory nature of this concept. The brain is a process, not a fixed entity. We are constantly changing in response to our experiences. The cells of our body are completely replaced every few years. Our preferences, beliefs, and even personalities change over time. Yet, we desperately cling to this notion of a permanent self, often causing ourselves suffering when reality does not align with our constructed self-image. I need to stop for a moment and ask you directly, which aspect of this future built upon collective illusions most awakens your fear or apprehension? Do you lie awake at night thinking about this too? I know that many times we keep these concerns to ourselves, perhaps for fear of seeming paranoid or naive in a world that celebrates every new shared narrative without questioning, but your concerns are valid and probably shared by more people than you imagine. Share in the comments. My greatest fear about our future built on collective illusions is your voice can help create a space where we can honestly discuss these collective fears instead of suppressing them. And perhaps by naming these fears together, we can begin imagining ways to face them. But going back to our discussion, what happens when someone starts seeing through these collective illusions? History is full of individuals who questioned the dominant narratives of their times and tried to awaken others. Think of Socrates questioning the conventions of Athenian society, of Gautama Buddha rejecting the Hindu caste system, of Galileo defying the church's geocentric cosmology, or of Martin Luther King Jr. confronting the fiction of racial supremacy. These individuals were not just proposing alternative ideas, they were challenging the very structure of social reality as it was understood in their times. And what was the result? Socrates was forced to drink hemlock. Buddha was initially ridiculed. Galileo was placed under house arrest for the rest of his life. King was assassinated. Human societies do not react well when their fundamental illusions are threatened. As philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer wrote, all truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently rejected. Third, it is accepted as self-evident. This is the almost inevitable fate of those who dare awaken from the collective illusion and try to awaken others. Why do we react so violently when our shared illusions are threatened? Because they form the foundation of our social reality. Questioning these illusions is not just challenging a specific idea, but potentially the entire structure that gives meaning to people's lives. It is like removing a cornerstone from a building. The entire structure may collapse, and that is extremely uncomfortable, even terrifying. However, something interesting is happening in our current era. With the advent of the internet and instant global communication, people are being exposed to multiple social realities, multiple collective fictions, all at the same time. A young person growing up today can easily learn the myths and beliefs of cultures on the other side of the world, can see how different societies construct their social realities in radically different ways. And this potentially makes it harder to believe that any one of these fictions is absolute or inevitable. When we see the diversity of ways humans organize their societies, it becomes harder to believe that our particular way is the only possible or the best. At the same time, digital technologies are creating new shared fictions at an unprecedented speed. Think of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. In a matter of years, not decades or centuries, millions of people began believing in the value of a totally digital currency that exists only as lines of code. Or consider the online identities many of us build on social networks, digital personas that may have little resemblance to who we are in the physical world, but nonetheless take on a reality of their own. We are now creating and inhabiting collective fictions at an accelerated pace, and in many cases, we are more aware of their constructed nature Virtual reality technology is perhaps the most literal example of how we are increasingly inhabiting constructed realities. When we put on a virtual reality headset, we are consciously entering a simulated world. But what is fascinating is how our brains quickly accept this simulation as real. Our hearts race when we stand at the edge of a virtual cliff, even knowing intellectually that we are safe in our living room. This suggests something profound about the nature of human consciousness and our relationship with reality. Perhaps all reality is, in a certain sense, virtual, constructed by the brain from sensory data and interpreted through layers of concepts and stories. This brings us to a crucial question. If all of our social structures are essentially shared fictions, if our identities are fluid constructions rather than fixed entities, if we are constantly creating and recreating reality through collective narratives, then what is real? Is there any solid reality beneath all these layers of interpretation and social construction? Cognitive scientists often speak of what they call the blue sky of consciousness, or pure consciousness, a state of direct perception before the brain begins to categorize and interpret. It is that brief moment in which you simply see, hear, feel, before the mind says, this is a chair, or that person looks angry, or I need to hurry. It is a direct experience of reality before the stories begin. Experienced meditators describe this as a state of extraordinary clarity, as if they were seeing the world for the first time, free from the distortions of expectations and pre-existing concepts. Perhaps this is what it means to escape the collective illusion on the most fundamental level. It is not about rejecting all shared fictions, which would be impossible for any human being functioning in society. Instead, it is about developing the ability to see these fictions for what they are, useful but contingent tools, not absolute truths. It is the ability to inhabit these stories while maintaining a certain lightness and awareness of their constructed nature. It is like the actor who can surrender completely to their role on stage, yet does not confuse the character with their true self. Contemplative traditions around the world, from Zen Buddhism to Sufism, from Christian mystics to Stoic philosophers, have described this process in different ways. But they all point to a fundamental transformation in the relationship with conceptual thought and social narratives. It is not about abandoning thought, which is a valuable tool, but about recognizing that the map is not the territory, that our concepts about reality are not reality itself. This brings us to modern technology and its relationship with our shared fictions. We are living in an era of unprecedented informational overload. The average human today is bombarded with more information in a single day than a person in the 17th century likely received in their entire lifetime. Our technologies constantly connect us to infinite streams of news, opinions, images, videos, all competing for our limited attention. And this overload is making it increasingly difficult to discern what is real, what is important, what deserves our attention. Paradoxically, while the amount of information has exploded, our ability to assign meaning to that information seems to be diminishing. We are suffering from what contemporary philosopher Byung-Chul Han calls the hell of the same, where the overabundance of information leads to a kind of flattening in which nothing seems to matter more than anything else. A global tragedy appears in our feeds next to a cat video, a political crisis next to a shoe promotion. Everything reduced to the same level, everything consumed in the same endless stream of content. This condition is creating a new form of imprisonment within collective illusions. It is no longer so much that we are deeply invested in a particular narrative, but that we are perpetually distracted, jumping from one narrative to another without ever really examining any of them deeply. We are so busy processing the constant flow of information that we lose the ability to pause, reflect, and question the fundamental premises of that information. In other words, informational overload is making it harder, not easier, to escape collective illusions. At the same time, our technologies are becoming increasingly skilled at detecting and exploiting our psychological vulnerabilities. The algorithms that control our social media platforms, news apps, and e-commerce sites are specifically designed to maximize the time, attention, and money we spend on them. They learn which emotional triggers keep us engaged, which fears and desires can be manipulated to keep our eyes on the screen. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is the explicit business model of these platforms. The result is a form of psychological manipulation on an industrial scale. Our attention, which is fundamentally the most precious resource we have as conscious beings, is being systematically harvested and sold to the highest bidder. And while our attention is trapped in these cycles of algorithmic engagement, it becomes increasingly difficult to find the mental space necessary to question the deeper collective illusions that structure our reality. This is the great irony of the information age. We have access to more knowledge than any previous generation, but we are increasingly trapped in echo chambers and feedback loops that reinforce rather than challenge our existing illusions. We are being programmed by our own devices, conditioned to react instead of reflect, to consume instead of contemplate. Yet, in the midst of all this algorithmic manipulation and informational overload, something interesting is happening. A growing number of people are beginning to recognize the nature of these dynamics and actively seeking ways to reclaim their mental autonomy. We see this in the rising interest in meditation and contemplative practices, in the humane technology movement that seeks to design technologies that respect rather than exploit our psychological vulnerabilities, in the resurgence of interest in ancient philosophies that offer tools to cultivate mental clarity in the face of distraction. These are small seeds of a possible counter-movement, signs that even as our technological systems become more sophisticated in manipulating our attention and reinforcing collective illusions, our capacity to recognize and resist this manipulation is also evolving. As in any complex system, when one force becomes dominant, compensatory forces begin to emerge. What is particularly fascinating is that many people who are starting to wake up from collective illusions are not rejecting technology altogether. Instead, they are seeking a more conscious and intentional relationship with it. They are exploring ways to use digital tools that expand rather than diminish their mental autonomy, that expand rather than contract their awareness, from meditation apps that help cultivate mindfulness to alternative platforms that prioritize deep reflection over superficial engagement, we are seeing the beginnings of what could be called a consciousness counterculture within the digital environment itself. Historically, when people began to see through dominant collective illusions, they often withdrew from society, forming alternative communities or seeking isolation. Think of Buddhist monasteries, the communes of the 1960 seconds, or figures like Thoreau retreating to Walden Pond. There was an implicit recognition that it was difficult, if not impossible, to maintain mental clarity while fully immersed in the social environment that sustained the illusions. Today, however, we are seeing something potentially new emerge. Instead of a physical withdrawal from society, we are witnessing attempts to create spaces of clarity within the very fabric of hyper-connected modern life. It is as if people are trying to remain in the world but not be completely of the world, to participate in technological society but maintain a certain critical distance from it, to use digital tools without being used by them. This brings us back to the central question: what does it really mean to escape the collective illusion in the 21st century? Perhaps it is not a matter of completely abandoning all stories and social structures. After all, we need shared narratives to function as a society. Instead, it may be a matter of developing what we could call narrative literacy, the ability to recognize stories for what they are, to understand how they shape our perceptions and behaviors, and to consciously choose which stories we want to inhabit. In this sense, escaping the illusion is not so much about escaping to somewhere outside all collective fictions, but about developing the mobility to move among different narratives, to inhabit multiple perspectives, to recognize that no single story, no matter how compelling, can capture the totality of human experience. Think of the example of someone who grows up deeply immersed in a single religious tradition, accepting its doctrines and practices without question, and then gradually begins to explore other spiritual traditions, philosophies, and scientific worldviews. Initially, there may be a period of crisis when previous certainties begin to crumble, but eventually, this person may arrive at a place where they are able to appreciate the wisdom and beauty of their original tradition without being limited by its more dogmatic or restrictive aspects. They develop the ability to inhabit multiple perspectives, to see their original tradition as one among many valid ways of making sense of human existence. This kind of narrative mobility, this ability to shift perspective, is perhaps the mark of someone who has begun to awaken from collective illusions. It is not that they no longer have beliefs or values. It is that they are less rigidly identified with any particular set of beliefs and values, more open to revision and refinement in light of new evidence and perspectives. Neuroscientists have a term for this: cognitive flexibility. It is the ability of the brain to adapt thinking and behavior in response to new, unexpected, or changing situations. People with high cognitive flexibility are better at shifting between different concepts, considering multiple aspects of a problem simultaneously, and adjusting their behavior when rules or scenarios change. In essence, they are less trapped in rigid thought patterns and more able to navigate complex and changing environments. This flexibility can be cultivated. In fact, practices such as mindfulness meditation have been shown to increase cognitive flexibility by training the brain to observe thoughts and emotions without immediately reacting to them or identifying with them. It is a kind of meta-awareness, an ability to observe the mind itself in operation, which creates the space for more conscious choices about which thoughts to follow and which to let pass. On a social level, we could say that people who have escaped the collective illusion are developing an analogous form of socio-cognitive flexibility. They are able to participate in multiple social systems, multiple communities and cultures without being completely defined or limited by any of them. They can navigate between different social contexts while maintaining a sense of continuity and agency. This flexibility seems increasingly important in a world characterized by accelerated change, cultural diversity, and interconnected complexity. The shared fictions that structure our social reality are transforming at an unprecedented rate. National identities, gender, work, family, all these constructions are undergoing profound transformations. People unable to adapt their personal narratives in the face of this change often retreat into fundamentalism of various kinds, clinging rigidly to old stories out of fear of completely losing meaning. On the other hand, those who have developed narrative flexibility can navigate these changes with more grace and resilience. They can inhabit the transformations without being completely disoriented by them. They can participate in the creation of new social narratives that better meet the emerging needs of humanity without completely losing continuity with the past. However, this mobility is not without its challenges. When we begin to see the constructed nature of all identities and social structures, a kind of existential vertigo can arise. If everything is in some sense a social construction, a shared fiction, then where do we find solid ground? How do we decide which stories are worth inhabiting? What prevents us from falling into an empty relativism where nothing really matters? These are serious questions, and they do not have easy answers. But perhaps the direction to explore them is not through more intellectual abstractions, but through a deeper engagement with direct experience. Beyond all our conceptual constructions and social identities, we are still embodied beings living in a physical world, capable of directly experiencing the warmth of the sun on our skin, the connection with other beings, the wonder of being alive in a vast and mysterious universe. Perhaps it is in this domain of direct experience that we can find a kind of grounding that neither depends rigidly on any particular narrative, nor falls into a nihilistic void. It is not a matter of finding the true story that explains everything, but of cultivating a relationship with reality that is simultaneously more immediate and more flexible, less mediated by fixed concepts, and more attuned to the flow of living experience. This orientation toward direct experience is not new. In fact, contemplative traditions have emphasized this for millennia. What is new is the technological context in which we must now navigate it. How do we maintain this connection with direct experience, this openness to unmediated reality in a world increasingly dominated by mediated realities, by screens, algorithms, and virtual environments. This is perhaps the most urgent question for anyone trying to escape the collective illusion today. And there is no single or simple answer. Each of us must find our own path, our own balance between engagement and distance, between social participation and individual clarity, between using technological tools and being used by them. What seems clear, however, is that this process is not something we can face entirely alone. We need each other. We need communities of practice, safe spaces, where we can explore these questions together, where we can share both our discoveries and our struggles as we navigate the complexities of modern life. Throughout human history, whenever people began to awaken from the dominant illusions of their time, they tended to find and support each other. Think of the philosophical circles of ancient Greece, the early Buddhist communities in India, the early Christian monasteries, the intellectual salons of the Enlightenment, contemporary contemplative communities. There has always been an implicit recognition that this kind of awakening is a collective endeavor, that we need fellow travelers on the path, and perhaps more than ever, we need those companions today. The pressure to conform to dominant narratives, to unquestioningly accept existing structures, is immense. The forces that benefit from our collective sleep are powerful. The sensory and informational overload we face is overwhelming. No one can navigate all of this completely alone. That is why spaces like this are so important. We are creating together a place where these questions can be explored openly, where these realities can be named, where we can help each other maintain clarity in the face of growing confusion. It is not just about consuming content, but about participating in an ongoing conversation, a collective inquiry into what it means to be human in this extraordinary era. If these reflections touched on something you have been feeling, but perhaps had no words to express, know that you are not alone. By subscribing to the channel, you connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of the philosophical challenges of our time. Each week, we meet here to explore together the great questions that define our era and to seek not only understanding, but also wiser ways of living amid the transformations we are witnessing. This is not just a channel, but a space for dialogue and collective growth. Join us on this ongoing journey. Subscribe so that we can continue this essential conversation about how to live with more wisdom and purpose in a world that so often leaves us disoriented and divided. In the end, perhaps escaping the collective illusion is not about reaching some final state of complete enlightenment or seeing through absolutely every social construction. That is probably not possible for any human being living in society. Instead, it is more like an ongoing awakening, a constant practice of questioning, of being attentive, of not taking dominant narratives for granted. It is about cultivating the ability to see the invisible structures that shape our reality, not to reject them completely, but to relate to them more consciously and deliberately. And perhaps most importantly, it is about reclaiming a sense of agency and responsibility for these narratives. If the collective fictions that structure our social reality are indeed human creations, then we have the power to recreate them. We are not mere passive spectators in a world handed to us as complete and immutable, but active co-creators of our shared reality. And with that power comes a profound responsibility. The responsibility to consciously participate in the creation of a world that honors the truth of our interdependence, our shared humanity, and our coexistence with the entire web of life on this extraordinary planet. This is the invitation that presents itself to each of us, not only to escape the existing collective illusions, but to participate in the creation of new shared narratives that are more true, more compassionate, and more conducive to the flourishing of all life. It is a work that never ends, a journey that continues to unfold, an ongoing dialogue between the individual and the collective, between the past and the future, between what is and what could be. It is in this dialogue that we find our fullest humanity, and it is to this dialogue that I invite you to join. One of the reasons that the order of the world is collapsing is that we have deficit of trust. And it makes us extremely vulnerable to AI. And it also guarantees a very dangerous kind of AI that will try and probably succeed in taking the world from us. You can think about AIs as the children of humanity. When you try to educate children, there are the things you say to them, and there are the things they observe you actually do. And your behavior has far more influence on their education than what you tell them to do. So if we kind of tell our AIs, don't be power hungry, don't be untrustworthy, don't cheat, don't lie, don't manipulate, and then the AI observes us constantly manipulating and cheating and grabbing power, the AI will learn from how we behave. If the AI tycoon himself, or in rare cases herself, behaves in an untrustworthy way, if he himself believes that all the world is just a power struggle, there is no way that he can produce a trustworthy AI. The good news is that this entire worldview is not just cynical and dangerous, it's also a mistake. It's not true that the only reality is power and that all human interactions are power struggles. Yes, power is an important part of the world. Yes, some human interactions or some part of human interactions, they are power struggles. And yes, some institutions or all institutions, they have problem with corruption, they have problem with people manipulating, but this is not the whole of reality. There are other aspects to human beings. Human beings, I think, are all of them, except if there are some extreme psychopath. They are genuinely interested in love, in compassion, in truth. This is not some cynical maneuver to gain power. What I would tell people who believe in the cynical, power-hungry worldview is just observe yourself. Is this the way you think about yourself? Do you think that you yourself don't care at all about the truth and you just want power? Probably not. You probably think you're different. If you have a better view of yourself, why aren't you charitable enough to acknowledge that other people, just like you, might also be really interested in knowing the truth or in having loving relationships with other beings? This is where we can start to build a more trustworthy philosophy, which is the only stable foundation for a good society and also for benevolent AIs. We can think about AI, like you said, like a baby or a child. And you can educate a child to the best of your ability. He or she will still surprise you, for better or worse. No matter how much you invest in their education, they are independent agents they might eventually do something which will surprise you and even horrify you. Everybody who has any knowledge of education knows that in the education of children, it matters far less what you tell them, it matters far more what you do. If you tell your kids, don't lie, and your kids watch you lying to other people, they will copy your behavior, not your instructions. If we have now these big projects to educate the AIs, but the AIs are given access to the world, and they watch how humans behave, and they see some of the most powerful humans on the planet, including their parents, lying, the AI will copy the behavior. People who think that I can run, say, this huge AI corporation, and while I'm lying, I will teach my AIs not to lie, it will not work. It will copy your behavior.
Please welcome Yuval Noah Harari and Sir Stephen Fry.
Goodness me, I wasn't sure anyone would turn up. Isn't this rather exciting? Well, it's a great thrill for me to be with this hero of mine, really, Yuval Noah Harari. I'm sure many of you will have read the book that catapulted his name into world fame, Sapiens, a remarkable history of our species, which involved many, many extraordinary insights and a kind of thrilling narrative of its own. But one of the things, Yuval, that I think many of us were impressed by was the way you showed that perhaps Sapiens was almost the wrong title. It wasn't that we were the wise humanity, but that we were storytelling humanity. That what separated us from the Neanderthals and from other primates and set us on our course was the fact that we told stories about ourselves and about the world as we apprehended it. Is that a fair summation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And would you say that this is both what gets us into trouble, because a story is also another word for a lie, and also what propels us into a stable future?
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword in this regard, which becomes particularly important in the age of AI, because for the first time in history, we encounter a better storyteller than we are. We took over the planet not because we are more intelligent than the other animals, but because we can cooperate better. And we cooperate through storytelling. And you have the obvious examples like religions, but my favorite example is money, which is probably the greatest story ever invented, ever told, because it's the only one everybody believes, or almost everybody. I mean, humans. No other animal on the planet knows that money even exists, because it only exists in our imagination. But now there is another thing on the planet that knows that money exists, and that can maybe invent new kinds of money and new kinds of other stories. And what will happen to us when we have to deal, it's not just with one better storyteller, but with billions of better storytellers than us on this planet. That's, I think, one of the biggest questions of our age.
Yes, and you're talking, of course, about AI, and it's recently come to light that one of the large language model corporations, Anthropic, has revealed that its latest instance of Claude was, in a closed test, was seen to blackmail some people in order to achieve a goal. And when we think about AI, we either get very dismissive of it. It's merely a parrot repeating probable instances of human communication, a stochastic parrot, as Emily Bender, the computational linguist, famously called it. It's every time it gives you a sentence, no matter how intelligent it appears, it is merely following a probabilistic route.
The question is it
Do
not
we
the
do
same
that?
with us?
Yeah, exactly.
When I look at the way sentences are formed in my own mind, like now when I'm talking with you, I don't know how the sentence will end. I start saying something, and the words just keep bubbling up in the mind. And as a public speaker, it's something terrifying because I don't know if I will be able to complete the sentence. I'm not sure what will be the next word.
That's right. You're talking and you're trying to make sense, and suddenly you've come up with lettuce. Where did that happen? It's an unrolling carpet. Syntagmatic, I think, is the technical word for it.
And the amazing thing with AI, you can now ask the AI to show you exactly how it thinks. You can actually watch how the logic unfolds in the AI in a way which is very difficult for us to do with our own minds, but we can now do, the AIs don't have minds, at least as far as we know, but we can see how the sentences, the stories are being formed in their, whatever we call it.
If we ask them to, but the fact is I've spoken to people like Geoffrey Hinton and people who are called the godfather of AI, and they would say that the most disturbing fact about these current models is that nobody knows what's going on under the hood. They don't actually know how it's doing what it's doing.
If we could know everything that's going on there and predict it, it wouldn't be AI.
That's the point. Exactly.
If you have something that you can predict how it will behave, what decisions it will make, what ideas it will invent, by definition, this is not AI. This is just an automatic machine.
The way to make that clearer, perhaps, is to recognize that AI now can beat, just on your phone, any chess player in the world. And you obviously can't predict the moves it's going to make, because if you could predict the moves it was going to make, you would beat it, or it would be a stalemate every time. And you expand that to the whole of AI. You don't know what it's going to say or do, which is why it's a useful tool. If it could only match what we did, it would be not a tool. It would be like saying that a digger, a JCB, could only dig as much as a human with a spade. The point is we have these machines to outmatch what we can do, yeah?
I think that's the main point. Both the main promise of AI is to be better than us at decision-making in many fields, that it would be able to invent things that we cannot think about, but that is also the main threat. That we cannot predict how it will behave, and we cannot control it in advance. No matter how much we try to make it safe, to align it with our aims, with our goals, I think it really goes to the heart of what AI is.
Yes.
That usually we think about AI as an acronym for artificial intelligence. But it's no longer artificial. If you think about what an artifact is something that we create and we control. With each passing day, AI is becoming less and less artificial, which is why I prefer to think about AI as an acronym for alien intelligence. It is, even the word, in a way, a true intelligence is never an artifact. Because an artifact is something that you create and control, whereas intelligence is characterized by the ability to create new things.
You used a verb there very quickly, but it's worth expanding on it, and that was align. And for those of us who are concerned, shall we say, about how AI is going, one of the main problems is what is known as the alignment problem. There's a simple way of looking at it, which is an old philosophical thought experiment called the genie. So if you imagine a genie who gives you a wish, and you love life and you're an empathetic person, so you say to the genie, can you really bring any wish true? And they say, yes. You say, in that case, could you end all suffering? And instantly, all life on the planet is extinguished. Because to the genie, they look at the world, and all suffering comes in form of life. All forms of life suffer. Smallest animals and us. That's the only place where suffering exists. Stones, as far as the genie is concerned, don't suffer. Maybe trees do, it's not sure, but if it gets rid of all life, it has solved our problem, and it bows and says, there you are, master. Now, that's a very broad sense of the alignment problem. We asked a very stupid question. We didn't think it through. But the fact is, yes, we have to understand AI and alien, but we really have to understand ourselves in order, because we don't have shared ethical frameworks around the world. How do you encode dignity, love, sympathy, passion, joy, equality? We've only just learned, if you like, recently that women's and men's lives and dignities are equal and that people of different races are equal. We've only just discovered this. And there are many other things we aren't sure about. And how, therefore, can we expect the machines to be sure? And therefore, we ask them a question, and it might do an equivalent of what the genie does. How do you see a solution to that?
Well, one of the other key things about AI, because it can learn and change by itself, so whatever we teach it, we cannot be certain that it will always just comply by our instructions. Again, if it only does what we tell it to do, it's not really an AI. So when we think about the alignment problem, or how to educate AI to be benevolent and not harmful, it's a very problematic and imperfect analogy, but I think it's still useful to think about AI as a child, as the child of humanity. And what we know about educating children is that they never do what you tell them to do. They do what they see you do. Yes. If you tell a child, don't lie, and then the child observes you lying and cheating other people, it will copy your behavior, not follow your instructions. Now, if we have, the kind of people who are leading the AI revolution, telling the AI, don't lie, but the AI observes them, observes the world, and sees them lying and cheating and manipulating, it will do the same. Yeah. I mean, if AI is developed not through a cooperative effort of humans who trust each other, but it is developed through an arms race, a competition. So again, you can tell the AI as much as you like to be compassionate and to be benevolent, but if it observes the world, because AI learns from observation. Yes. Yeah. If it observes the world, it observes how humans behave towards each other, it observes how its own creators behave. And if they are ruthless, power-hungry competitors, it will also be ruthless and power-hungry. You cannot create a compassionate and trustworthy AI through an arms race. It just won't happen.
Well, yes, Yuval, you've said this. If you had said this in 1980 during what was known as the AI winter, we'd say, yes, we must plan and make sure this isn't happening. But it's already happening. There is an arms race. The very people who are spending the billions and billions are the same people, for example, Mark Zuckerberg and Meta, who gave us the disaster of Facebook and social media and what it has done to the polity of the world and to the poverty of the world, to essentially, in this country, as we know, the rivers are polluted and contaminated. You wouldn't swim in any river in Britain because there's raw sewage being poured into it. Well, our children are breathing a cultural river, which is similarly polluted and contaminated. And we all know this, and Facebook knows this, and Twitter and X know this, but they do nothing about it. And if you even mention guardrails and regulation, they scream communism. And Trump has just announced that he will ban individual states in America from regulating AI. There is an arms race. So everything you said is happening. So how can we come together to stop AI in the hands of corporate greed and national greed in this arms race, whether it's China against America or it's one company against another, it's going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, it's moving very fast, partly because there is also enormous positive potential, of course. You know, in everything from healthcare to tackling the climate emergency. Yes. So we have to acknowledge there is also this enormous positive potential. The question is not how to stop the development of AI, it's how to make sure that it is used for good. And here, I think that the main problem is simply an issue of priority, of what comes first. Humanity now faces two major challenges. On the one hand, we have the challenge of developing a super intelligent AI. On the other hand, we have the challenge of how to rebuild trust between humans, because trust all over the world, both between countries and also within countries, is collapsing. Nobody is absolutely certain why it's happening, but everybody is able to observe it. I mean, maybe the last thing that, let's say, Republicans and Democrats in the US can agree on is that trust is collapsing.
Yes.
It's that they don't trust each other. They don't agree on any fact except that they don't trust each other.
So this is the worst possible time for us to come together. We no longer believe in global institutions like the United Nations, the WHO.
Even in national institutions.
Yes.
I mean, one of the explanations for the collapse of trust is that over thousands of years, I mean, humans have been amazing in building, despite all the conflicts and tensions and so forth. You know, 100,000 years ago, humans lived in tiny bands of hunter-gatherers and could not trust anybody outside their band of 50 or 100 individuals. Now we have nations of hundreds of millions of people. We have a global trade network, a global scientific network with billions of people. So we are obviously quite good at building trust. Yeah. But over thousands of years, we have built trust through human communication. And now, within almost every relationship, there is a machine, an algorithm, an AI in between. And we see a collapse of trust in humans, whereas there is a rise of trust in algorithms and AIs. Again, I mentioned money as the greatest story ever told. So you see that people are losing trust in human-made money, like euros and dollars and pounds, but they shift the trust
from fiat to
cryptocurrencies and to an algorithm-based money. So we have these two problems of the developing AI and rebuilding trust between humans. And the question is which one we solve first, which is the priority. Now, unfortunately, you hear some of the smartest people in the world, they say, first we solve the AI problem, and then with the help of AI, we'll solve the trust problem. And I think this is a very bad idea. If we develop AI through an arms race between humans who can't trust each other, there is absolutely no reason to expect that we'll be able to trust the AIs. I mean, the big paradox is that when you talk with people like Mark Zuckerberg, like Elon Musk, they often say openly that they are also afraid of the dangerous potential of AI. They are not blind to it, they are not oblivious to it, but they say that they are caught in this arms race, that if I slow down, my competitors will not slow down, I can't trust them, so I must move faster. But then you ask them, okay, so you can't trust your human competitors. Do you think you'll be able to trust this super intelligent alien intelligence you're developing? And the same people who just told you they can't trust other humans tell you, oh, but I think we'll be able to trust the alien AIs, which is almost insane. So the right order of doing it is first solve the human trust problem, then together, in a cooperative way, we can develop and educate trustworthy AIs. But unfortunately, we are doing the exact opposite.
Yes. And there's, as you know, there's been for decades the doomsday clock, which the nuclear scientists set midnight is Armageddon, the end of everything. And it's been roughly at 89 seconds to midnight for the last few years. It's crept up over recent days for obvious reasons. But there's another metric that I've been studying recently called P-doom. It's the letter P, which is probability, brackets, doom, close brackets. It's one used by people in the business, so, you know, the scientists in AI. So, for example, Alicia Yudkowsky, who's the founder of the Machine Intelligence Research Institute in California, sets P at 90. That's to say, a 90% chance of human extinction through AI. Jan LeCun, who is the chief scientist for Meta, sets it at 0. But then he is the chief scientist for Meta. So that's like a tobacco executive saying, cancer? No chance. What are you talking about? Can't possibly happen. But so I've worked out that roughly the lowest median is between 7.5% and 10% of human catastrophe, of an extinction order through AI, if things are not controlled in the way you say they should be. Now, the chance of winning the lottery in this country is 0.0000022%. So what you're saying here is that the chance of human extinction at 7.5%, which is the lowest really amongst the current important scientists, Nobel Prize winners like Hinton and Hassabis, 7.5% is 3.4 million times greater than 0.00022%. So if I were to give you a lottery ticket and say this is a valid lottery ticket, the only difference is you are 3.4 million times more likely to win, you would take it. And that's the odds we're playing with at a low rate. So let's look at the bad side of things. As we've said, we're going about it in the wrong order, as you've put it. Most people who understand the science say there is a very severe chance that humanity will be extinguished by this, a greater chance than by nuclear Armageddon, in fact, or indeed climate change. And humans are not in a position at the moment to trust each other and to establish guardrails, to agree on how we should go forward. So do you have a solution for us, Yuval? I'm almost on my knees begging you at this point. I don't have children, so I can almost say I don't care. But I have lots of godchildren, and I have lots of great nieces and great nephews, so I do care about what happens to our planet. And I'm sure you do too.
Again, I think that it's very dangerous to think too much about, you know, kind of doomsday and extinction scenarios. They cause people to despair. We do have what it takes to manage this revolution because we are creating it. You know, this is not the dinosaurs being extinguished by an asteroid coming from outer space that they have no way of even understanding, let alone controlling. This is a process which, at least for now, is under human control. In 5 years, in 10 years, we will have millions and even billions of AI agents taking more and more decisions, inventing more and more ideas. It will be a hybrid society. So it will become more difficult, but we need to start with the realization that this is a completely human-made danger. We have everything we need in order to manage it. The main missing ingredient is trust between human beings. And again, over tens of thousands of years, we have demonstrated that we are capable of building trust, even on a global level. Yes. So it's not beyond our capabilities. And it then goes back, you know, to the old questions of politics and ethics, of how do you build trust between human beings. And we need to think also about more kind of concrete and immediate questions. One of the biggest questions we will be facing in the next few years is how to deal with these new AI agents.
Yes.
Do we consider them as persons? More and more people are entering relationships, personal relationships with AIs. More and more corporations and armies are giving AIs control, agency over important decisions. This is not, some kind of philosophical question.
No,
It's a
real.
completely, should AIs have the ability to open a bank account and manage a bank account? Yeah. That's a very practical question. We are very close to the point when you can tell an AI, go out there, make money. Your goal is to make $1 billion.
Yeah.
In computer science, very often the difficult question is, how do you define the goal?
Yeah.
And one of the things about money, it's a very easy goal to define.
Yeah.
Now, an AI can make money in many ways. It can hire its services to people to write their essays or books or whatever, many things it can do. It can earn money. It can then invest this money in the stock exchange. Yeah. So do we as a society want to allow AI agents, and then this is not a question for 50 years, this is a question for 5 years, maybe 1 year, to open bank accounts and manage them in any way they see fit.
Yeah.
In the US, basically, the legal system, they never thought about it, but I'm not sure about the situation in the UK, but in the US, there is an open legal path for AIs to be recognized as persons with rights.
Yes, Pete Singer has written about this and
Because,
others.
Yeah. In the according to US law, corporations are persons and they have rights like freedom of speech.
Yes.
Now, so in the US, you can incorporate an AI. Previously, when you incorporated a corporation like Google or General Motors or whatever, this was a fiction.
Yeah.
Because all the decisions of Google were made by human beings.
Yes.
So, okay, legally, Google is a person with rights, but every decision of Google needs a human executive, accountant, engineer, lawyer to make the decision. Yeah. Now this is no longer the case. Yeah. You can incorporate an AI, and the AI can make the decisions by itself.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that the US Supreme Court recognized corporations as persons is in order to make it possible for corporations to donate money to politicians. This was the Citizens United Supreme Court decision. Right. Now, so imagine an AI that makes billions of dollars. It's maybe the richest person in the US in a few years will not be Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg. It will be an AI. Yeah. And this AI has the freedom of speech, which includes the right to donate money to politicians, maybe on condition that they further advance rights for AI.
Absolutely, and reduce guardrails and so forth. Yes.
Now, this is a completely realistic scenario. This is not like science fiction.
No, absolutely.
So, and this is a question that we as a society need to decide, do we acknowledge AIs as persons with rights? Now, there are people who are already convinced that AIs, because they have interaction with them, have consciousness, have feelings. So maybe in a few years, the world is divided between countries that recognize AIs as persons with rights and countries that don't.
Absolutely. And I suppose for everyone in the room, there's a consideration. I remember I gave a talk on AI back in 2015 in Hay-on-Wye, and I said that the way things are going, there are certain jobs that people might not have. I said, for example, if you have a child who's studying to be a doctor, that's fine, but maybe a radiologist. And a woman put her hand up very crossly and said, my daughter's studying radiology. And I said, well, imagine that every mammogram ever taken is available to an AI and it can examine thousands in a second and make a judgment on it. A radiologist is going to go out of work. Now, who's going to go out of work here? I don't know if the chief financial officer is present of Octopus, but I have been sort of talking to some people who say that the first really high-level job to be replaced by an AI completely will be a CFO. They can be so well, everything they do.
It's already happened. It's news editors.
Right.
One of the most important jobs in the 20th century, even before, was news editors. Yeah. The editors of the newspapers, of the television, they were extremely powerful people who control the public conversation.
But
And-
I think what I would just end by saying to everybody is maybe don't concentrate on how efficient you are, on how brilliantly you complete a task, because that's what AI can do, especially the agentic AI that Yuval's been talking about. Concentrate on what a wonderful human being you are, how kind you are, how courteous, how considerate, how you improve the life of those around you, which is very often the opposite of what efficient people do. And maybe that, for the time being, at least, is the secret, that human exceptionalism will be how good we are as people, how much we make a room light up when we walk into it, how much pleasure we spread, not how quickly we can complete a task, because we'll never match the AI. So on that note, at least I think we should end, and I hope we haven't given too much terror to everybody. I will always say that the thing about this technology is it's simultaneously thrilling and chilling. And the thrilling parts may well cause us all to live much longer, happier lives. We can hope so. But Yuval, as always, an absolute joy speaking to you, and thank you for...
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.